Hey everybody, it's LavenderTowne, and have you ever wanted to make your OC or sona feel alive? Today I'm going to show you one of the most fun and easy ways to bring your OC or sona to life. This technique requires no animation, and by the end of this you'll have a little stash of drawings that'll make your OC or sona feel way more alive and real. So first I wanted to show you guys how I actually drew the sona reaction drawings that I use in my videos right now. This is a very practical and very real example of some actual professional drawing that I did for my YouTube channel. So as you can see, these are poses that you've probably seen me pull several different times. The thing I really wanted to focus on with this first set was just having sort of like normal talking poses. You can see one where my hand is kind of out, one where they're behind my back and it's a little more casual, and then one where I'm like super stoked. Drawing them in a line like this does create a little bit more work for yourself later when you're exporting everything, but ultimately I thought it was more useful because at least I could very easily check the proportions between each of the poses. They're not like perfectly on model the way that you would need for like an animation, but it's close enough that it clearly looks like the same character and things are not going wildly out of proportion, and that's all you're gonna need for this. Now, one of the greatest things about this technique is that you get a ton of variety from relatively minimal drawing. So as you can see, I have some pre-baked facial expressions that I have on each of these poses. However, we're going to be mixing and matching a lot of different faces onto each of these poses, which will give us a huge library by the time that we're done. So before we get into our new ones, I just want to show you guys all the different layering that I'm doing. So as you can see, the faces are in their own little group, and the heads and bodies are separated as well. And I'll show you how I attach the heads and the bodies. It's kind of funny looking, and it's something that I learned from like my doll refacing experience, which is minimal, but still. So yeah, here's how it's all laid out. Make sure that you are separating these things because it's going to make it so much easier for you to create a whole bunch of different versions without having to redraw constantly, which is one of the points of this whole technique. We're trying to make sure that we have a huge variety with relatively minimal drawing, and it'll just make it a lot easier for you to build out your folder of your little React guy. So for our new set, the first thing I wanted to do was basically the exact same as I did initially. I'm going to be drawing a couple different poses with some pre-baked in expressions that I think will work well with the poses. This time I wanted to create some more extreme ones and just some expressions or emotions that I felt like wasn't already in my little folder. So I wanted to have one that was a bit more high energy and maybe like a little bit angry or frustrated. Just an alternate kind of like yapping pose because I feel like I always need more of those. And then one that has the body like straight on. It's going to be a little more complicated getting the facial expressions to map onto this final one just because all the other ones are at an angle, but I'll show you guys how we will still be able to do that. And I just brought in the headless corpse of my little sona so I can make sure that the sizing is about right, just because I want to make sure that these are all in similar scale. It will just make it much easier when we get into the uploading and separating part of this whole process. So again, here is how I draw the heads. The heads are basically just like a stump of neck that goes a bit longer than you would actually expect it to go. And this is just so we can easily nest it inside my little turtleneck. Depending on the way that your sona, like kind of the color of their shirt, you might want to play around with this. This is just the easiest way to do it because I have such a high-necked outfit for my sona, so it's really easy to just stick her head in there by this little skinny neck, but there's a couple different ways. You just want to make sure that it's consistent so that you're not running into situations where things cannot easily map onto the other poses and other facial expressions that you picked. And I tried to make sure that the proportions were also pretty similar to the ones I did the first time, and also make sure you check your line weight. That's that's another thing that can start to look a little bit different, so just keep an eye on it. I actually in Procreate have a little like level where I usually like to keep my inking line weight, and that's helped me tremendously. When you're putting in your sona, you might want to simplify them just a little bit. Now this is not as exhausting as say like animation, but you still want to simplify just a touch. I always try to make sure that my reaction images are maybe not as aggressively like shaded and brushy and like more painterly like I do in my illustrations, just because it makes this whole process easier, and it makes it easier for you to match all the different poses. The illusion that we're trying to create is that this is just one character who's moving on your screen, rather than a bunch of bespoke little illustrations that you're morphing into each other. So for my version, I'm using a full facial expression on each of these poses and making sure that these are in a folder away from the rest of the sona. You could even separate your like mouths and eyes if you wanted to mix and match like an angry mouth with like wide eyes or closed eyes or something like that. It kind of depends on what you want to do with your sona. For me, I like drawing expressions so much that I'm perfectly happy to redraw them over and over. But if you have maybe a more realistic art style, it might be beneficial to mix and match the mouth and the eyes. Just whatever you're going to want to be able to mix and match, just make sure it's in its own folder. So one thing you can do to make sure you're actually making ones that you'll really use, if you're going to use it for like a YouTube channel or something like that, just go back and listen to some of your own old videos, or even just record some audio for yourself and kind of see with a regular cadence of your voice what you're likely to actually need. I have a tendency to make really dramatic expressions and emotions for my reactions, and as a result there's a lot that I don't use all the time. So just knowing your own personality can also help with this. And if it's your OC, obviously just try to match it to their personality. So once you have a set of 3 faces, we're going to actually put all of these 3 faces on each of the 3 poses, giving us exponentially more options. So we're just going to duplicate, or I guess triplicate, triple? We're gonna triple each of the faces, and then basically you just want to gently transform them so that they fit onto the head a little bit better. It takes relatively minimal moving around. If you really wanted to make them look super right, you might want to individually move things, like make sure the nose is centered on a center head, but it is kind of amazing how even just a little bit of tweaking can make it look pretty nice, or like proper, at least enough to use as like a little reaction image. Because they're switching so quickly, you really don't have to be a perfectionist, and the effect is still pretty good. So you can see I have my little bundle of grins, my little bundle of the Azumanga Daioh kind of cat face, and then these bloodshot eyes tired faces. Once you have all those sets on different layers, we can move on to the next step. But before we switch off the iPad, this video is kindly sponsored by Paperlike. Paperlike 2.1 is a screen protector for artists and creatives. I talk about using my iPad for work a lot. I even did the latter half of my comic book Unfamiliar almost entirely on the iPad, but I hear from some of you guys that you don't like how slippery the iPad screen is to draw on. I really like how Paperlike solves this problem. It's a super thin screen protector that adds a texture on the screen that mimics the feel of drawing on paper. It also protects your screen at the same time. They use nanodots technology, which allows them to simulate the texture without messing up the clarity or the color of the screen below. I also in particular like how it helps with glare, not only for my own eyes, but also for when I want to take photos or videos of the screen. Each pack comes with 2 screen protectors and a little kit to help you apply it. Paperlike is designed in Germany and manufactured in Switzerland, and they prioritize durability and quality so you don't have to worry about replacing it all the time. If you draw or take notes on your iPad frequently, I highly recommend you try Paperlike's screen protector. Check out the link in the description, and thank you again to Paperlike for supporting the channel. Okay, so just showing you guys again, this is how I separated this new set. I have 2 sets of faces, and within each of these folders we have like our ink and our color layer, all of that regular stuff. Using the folders just makes it a lot easier to tab between them and keep it organized. So next up is kind of the boring, tedious part, but it's very necessary. It is where you export all of these little guys. Just open up a image file with a transparent background and layer them all on top of each other so that they're taking up the similar amount of space, and so that the point at which they're standing from is similar, so that when you switch between them it feels more natural and you're not constantly having to shift them while you're editing your little React guy in. Now, if you actually drew each of these individually and didn't have the 3 sets next to each other the way that I do it, you wouldn't have to do all this fiddling, and frankly, I shouldn't have been doing any resizing. I'm gonna have to redo this entire part of it, so just ignore that aspect of it because they were actually at the right scale. I thought I had messed something up, but actually I hadn't, so anyway, all you really should have to do is position them into the right spot, and then everything else should be taken care of because you drew them all on top of the same poses, so they're already in scale. And then you're just going to save each of these guys as a transparent PNG. If it's a JPEG, they're going to fill in the background and you don't want that. And you want to save them into a folder, and I just basically name them based on the facial expression and then 1, 2, or 3 for the pose. If you're doing tons and tons of poses, I recommend naming the pose and the face, but for my purposes, the numbering system works just fine. So here is how it looks all filed away. Once you have them all exported, you can do the fun part, which is editing them in. So take whatever audio you're using and then plop in the different images wherever it makes sense for the expression to change, and at first you'll get something like this. This is the trick to making sure that your little guy, every time it switches pose or expression, it feels natural and like everything is kind of alive and animated, even though you're not really doing much animation. So sharp-eyed observers might notice that that was not very smooth, so now I'm going to show you how I actually edit it so that the character looks like it's kind of animating between poses, and it's actually so easy. So my video editing program of choice is Final Cut Pro, but this will work in any editing program that allows you to transform the PNGs that you bring in. And all I'm going to do is make a little keyframe for the normal position, make another one right before the poses switch, and squish her down, as you can see me doing here. And on the other side, for the other pose, I'm just going to do the opposite. I'm going to stretch it up. So what will happen is it will look like, as you can see, I'm stretching. She will stretch up and then bounce down into the next pose, and in that movement we will hide that switch between the 2 poses, and basically the human brain does the rest. It's really simple. If you absolutely cannot find an editing program that allows you to do like keyframed transformations like this, you can also just individually save each poses with a stretch up and a squish down, and you can do this manually just with that sort of transformation. It's a lot easier to do in a program like this because they tween it a little bit so it looks even smoother, but luckily the human mind loves to autofill things, so honestly, even if it doesn't have the tweening, it still will look pretty good and pretty convincing. Now you can get relatively advanced with this. I don't often because I find it's not usually super necessary, but for example, if your character is switching to a pose where they're like squished down more or like bending over, you can even use transforms for like the position of the character, and you can kind of like lean them over into the next pose. Just play around with it and you'll be surprised at how quickly it will start to look animated with basically no animating. So here's how it looks now that we've done our little bits of keyframe transformation. This is the trick to making sure that your little guy, every time it switches pose or expression, it feels natural and like everything is kind of alive and animated, even though you're not really doing much animation. And I'm so mad about it. Just kidding, I'm not. I just wanted to use my mad face. Anyway, let's get back to the video. So that's the full process on how I make my little reactive OC/Sona thing. I hope this was helpful to you guys, or at least entertaining, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you so much to my wonderful members and patrons, including Alice Exley, Neko Mori, Roger Baker, Trexa Panda, Zio Reyes, Lucian, Shaola Ninja, Lexi Ramos, Lonely Zealot, Novel Goblin, The Mousy Mouse, Spark of Curiosity, Rosie Valentine, Paul Savanat, Frog Scourge, Clown of Clubs, Prince Piplet III, Celery Sticks, I'm a Potato, Honey Kitten, Nee Nico, Loro, Data, Lily McFarlane, Skitten, Gold Pikachu, Ace Wander, Jordan, Hubie, Jeffu, Songbird Galesworth, Sunshine, Whimsic, Hoodle Doodle, River de Goblin, Raz Tarosh, Graveyard Moss, Grexius, Emmy Lightning, The Midwestern Menace, CB, Lucy Yamajiki, Live Live, Ravens Crow, Zocelot, Keyhole Music, Jabber Dabber Doo, Light Jewel, Kadaria, The Expressive Poker Face, Tsuvaki, Cutie Pie, Ice Cream Pal, Cola, JJ Jade, and of course, Lib Lib Blah.